Peter Carvelli is a lawyer, James Beard Semifinalist Chef, restaurant owner, music lover, and curator of unique dining experiences. The following conversation with Chef Pete reveals how his background, mental model, and balanced thinking led to burning the bridges so he could set the table for all of us at Foglia, his plant-based eatery. So welcome to the vault, Peter Carvelli. You went under the Innovate sign, and the first thing you said walking into Pickworks at Mocha was, I have that sign too. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the sign, where it's located, and what you do for a living? Because this is all about career exploration, right?
Well, it's great to be in the vault. Great to be with you, Dr. D.
It's good to be here with you, man.
So I'm a chef in Bristol, Rhode Island.
Okay.
And innovation is very important to us. We're a plant-based restaurant, 100% vegan and nut-free.
Okay. Wow, totally nut-free.
Totally nut-free. We have coconuts, but other coconuts and coconut oils, but other than that, no tree nuts.
Okay.
Been open since July of 22, end of July.
Okay.
And we're doing okay.
You're doing, I think that's a bit of an understatement, right? You're doing really well. How many months or years were you open when you received notification from the James Beard Foundation that you were a semifinalist?
A year and a half.
So that's better than pretty good. Okay. We appreciate your humility, but just the same. So the Innovate sign that you walked under when you and Linda arrived at Pickworks, you called attention to that and told me a little bit about how you have that in your kitchen so that if guests are looking through at the kitchen and they say, move about the dining area, that they'll see the word Innovate.
Yeah, we taped it, or I taped it to the wall that is most visible through that window.
Okay.
So that anybody walking into the kitchen, including my cooks and staff and everybody, sees that.
Okay. It's
vertically taped with the blue tape that's so familiar to kitchens. And we're not a typical restaurant in any way, really. And I'm not a typical chef in any way. And one of the things that drives a chef-driven restaurant isn't just the chef making everything and coming up with every idea.
Mm-hmm.
It's the team having that opportunity to do it. Mm-hmm. One of my cooks was at a very, very well-known restaurant outside of Boston and was never asked to contribute to the menu. Very good chef there, but that was his style. He would come up with everything. And I think that what I'm trying to do with my team at Foglia is to empower them to do that, not just to take a load off of me. I can come up with the menu. I can be creative in 2 minutes if I have to come up with something. And every once in a while I have to. In that respect, somebody comes in with a particular allergy or they want a certain pasta shape but don't like the sauce or have an allergy to mushrooms or something. So I'm trying to get our staff to think that way and to innovate and to take that next step and to...
So it's a group sport innovation at Foglia.
Absolutely.
Okay. Which is why I think we feel so connected, because at the Berkshire Innovation Center, right, it's always we can do more together. So we were going over all those names, the partners, the academic institutions and the private companies and even philanthropic organizations and foundations that are part of our ecosystem. And, there's no mistaking the fact that we kind of like that you are exploring the Berkshires and trying to figure out where to plant yourself. And part of this innovation that you do as a team, somewhere here that can complement or serve the Berkshire population and your Southern Rhode Island restaurant. So we're excited to have you here. And you're not also, as you pointed out, a typical chef because you were a lawyer turned chef. And, you are still a lawyer, right? It's something that you have a terminal degree in, right? You're a JD and you're in practice in multiple states, but you have recently hung up that lawyering cap for sure, right?
Yes,
There's no rescinding it. You're out. You're full-time chef.
Full-time chef.
Full-time chef.
As many lawyers do, I found something else. It really wasn't because I didn't like being a lawyer. I just found what I'm good at. It took me 50 years, but I figured out what I'm best at and was able to nurture that cooking along while still practicing law at first.
So they were going on at the same time for a while, right?
Same time.
Yeah.
And for quite a while. And until 2 weeks ago.
Let's dive into the little lawyer days when you were a young kid. I don't know if you were one of those sort of kids that was great at litigating with mom and dad or your sibs. But let's go back a little bit on the journey, right? Because this is very much about your identity, your narrative identity, but also decision points in your life, right? Your ability to kind of go left, right, or make a curve happen in that trajectory. But the plot line kind of makes sense. So let's go back to wherever you feel comfortable. Young Peter, the soon-to-be eventual lawyer turned chef. What were you doing as a kid related to either of these two professions? Forget about those two professions, careers. Careers developed over time. Yep. What were you doing for play?
Well, I had a really good childhood when it comes to that. I was thinking my first job actually was in food in a sense. I picked apples off the ground at a farm across the street from where I lived, an apple orchard.
Okay.
And
was this Phantom Farm?
Phantom Farm.
Okay. So you have Phantom Farm.
Phantom Farm there. Okay. And then I didn't particularly enjoy school, but I lived in an adjacent to a couple of neighborhoods, a couple of plats, as we say in Rhode Island, that had a lot of people, a lot of kids my age, and we would play street hockey and basketball and a lot of wiffle ball and all outdoor things until our hands froze in the colder months. And
you were one of those kids, but from back in the day when outdoor play was a thing.
It was a thing.
Still a thing here in the Berkshires. I want to bring that up just to continue to sell you on the place.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't give that up for the world. It was just such a good thing to do. I had a lot of fun with my friends. It seemed like my childhood lasted a long time compared to, as a dad, my thoughts about how quickly my children grew up. Mm-hmm. But we really wasn't cooking, and although I thought about the law, that was not my goal. I was a photography kid.
Were you rules based in these wiffle ball games? Were you the guy who cited the rules or something like, "Hey, there's no stealing"? We called that at the beginning. Was there any rule creating or enforcing in your? Oh, of course, enforcement's like police, but there was none of that going on for you?
No, I was really a follower. I was never particularly good at any of the sports I'm talking about. Although I could pitch pretty well with wiffle balls. We had a piece of plywood with a taped out strike zone, and
Billy, you're a pitcher.
Could do an underhand slider that was pretty good.
Nasty. Okay, all right. Something to note for family reunions.
There you go. Okay. But I really wasn't doing that. I picked up photography when I was in 8th grade, or just before 8th grade. My father bought. Obviously, these were the days of film, and he bought a camera, and I remember we were going on vacation, and I wanted to bring it, and he wouldn't let me because he was afraid that I would lose it or something. And then when I got back, I started really dove into photography, and remember taking a black and white roll of film of a friend of mine in this neighborhood that I'm talking about, a kid I played wiffle ball with and Nerf football with, and took pictures of him and his dog.
Okay.
And taped black paper up into our bathroom and developed my first roll of film.
You turned your bathroom into a dark room.
To a dark room. And the magic of taking that film out of the final wash and looking at it through the light was amazing. And I was hooked.
Well, was it hard to do for you the first time developing? Because people... folks who I've met along my life path who are photographers, who have done dark rooms and developed their own work. It's pretty much, as I understand it, an acquired skill that has a little trial and error to it. And were you good at it out of the gate, or was it something that required, that developed over time way of going about it?
I think I followed the instructions, and it was pretty much chemistry. In fact, I did my 8th grade science fair project was on photography, and I think I won the chemistry division. I didn't know there was a chemistry division until they announced it.
So you went to the underlying understanding of the chemical reactions in the process, and you followed how they were organized as instructions. Well, this kind of is eye-opening. I didn't know this about you. So this is, I knew that you went to RIT, right? And which is known for photography and graphics. But let's stay, so we see some emerging competencies and mental muscles in this young Peter. So Peter with the good underhand slider, is that what it was? Underhand slider, figured out very quickly how to be good. That's the answer you gave me, right? At developing film in a bathroom that wasn't a dark room, but was made a dark room. What did your parents say about this? Did they go for it? Did they say, hey, you can turn the bathroom. We don't really need to take a bath or a shower, kiddo. Take it away.
Yeah, we within, I don't remember exactly the timeline, but there was a basement room that the previous owner, we lived in a pretty old house, had used for ham radio operating. And my father and I gutted it, built a dark room. He bought a porcelain sink. I don't know where he got it, but it weighed about as much as a car. And we installed it. A good friend of mine at the time, a kid I played street hockey with, helped me hang a drop ceiling. And I had a dark room. We bought some used printing equipment, and I went whole hog, and I spent just hours in there and developed this, excuse the pun, skill and as to develop the film and to print, which back in the day, this was obviously prior to digital even being a thought.
Yeah, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. I mean, you were in 8th grade, right?
8th grade, and then all through high school, I was sort of the yearbook photographer for quite a while, and did a few little side jobs and fun things.
So I have a question. Your dad didn't get in the way, but he was part of the way, right? He didn't get in the way. He was part of the way. So he allowed you, right, to kind of have space to do your thing, right? Being that self-determined 8th grader. But he didn't do it all for you. I don't think he did, right? Am I interpreting this right? Like he was supportive, but not pulling your shirt sleeve in a direction.
Right. He was supportive of something that I came up with that I liked. And in fact, I think he found the darkroom equipment from somebody and was very supportive, incredibly so. And we created this room.
But are you with me in the distinction making right there? He was part of the way, but not in the way. And I think parents today seem to get in the way of the impulse young people have, who are individuals, and they're trying to figure out what they like. And sometimes when someone else is getting in your way, it becomes more difficult to actually do the thing that you want to do because they're not part of the way, they're in the way. And I find it not an appropriate way of defining Sal and your relationship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. I just want to make sure I got it right.
You got it right.
I don't want to read anything, and I'm not Nostradamus, right? I'm just no predictions or mind reading. Was it Kreskin was a mind reader, I think? Yeah, Nostradamus was Kreskin, the predictor. Yeah. All right, can make sure I get that right. So you're taking pictures now you're in Massachusetts, our favorite state, of course, Commonwealth of Massachusetts. You're Bishop Fian?
Yes.
Okay. And you're taking pictures. Did you just raise your hand and say, hey, I'm going to be the photographer? Were you known and by others as being the kid who loved pictures? How did this come to be your thing?
We had an early gathering or assembly, I guess, and I knew I liked taking pictures, and I had a camera, and I volunteered for the yearbook. There wasn't a particularly active newspaper It was there, but there wasn't
So
much
you had
to
a
do.
newspaper and a yearbook.
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, the yearbook was photographing, all the events. And I probably started in September of that first freshman year when I was just terrified of everything and got to hide behind that camera. It was always this almost a veil that I got to sort of hide behind. And when you're at these events, you have to sort of go to the front but would have the camera there I was pretty active doing that in the first probably 2.5 years of high school. And then it sort of faded. And
So let's go back to this. I like almost like a big gulp, right? Like recalling the moment, like I'm this ninth grade at that point.
yes,
And you have to be with people who are up to same age, but also 3 years older than you at an event where you're not playing the sport or doing the thing, but you have to be in the fringe of where that thing is happening and almost in the thing. And you're in the front of all of the spectators and folks who are part of the school spirit that's enlivening this experience, but you're hiding behind the camera. So you're a part of it, but you're kind of feeling invisible.
yeah, I'd say that's accurate.
Okay.
And when I became a photographer, I'm just professionally for newspapers, quite a few years later, it felt like I was on the fringes,
Okay.
which is what a newspaper photographer does. He or she documents what other people are doing. And I think eventually that became annoying. I mean, I'm jumping 2 decades, but
It's okay.
and why I stopped wanting to do that as I wanted to do versus document what was being done.
Okay. And that's a really big distinction, like catching sight of what's happening, but not being part of it versus injecting your own creativity into it. Even though your documenting is still a creative act because you're picking when to take the picture, right? To create the image or the still of the experience for someone. Okay. All right. So now you have a high school career. You're this famed, photographer at Bishop fan. Great school. Tim Sullivan is the president.
President now, my classmate. Yeah.
You're a classmate. Okay. Well, I have bumped into along my life journey. Oh, a great add to the school, right?
Oh, wonderful.
Wonderful ad. So you then decide to go to Rochester. Did someone not tell you about lake effect snow? Because they didn't tell me about it. And we were in Rochester at the same time.
We were.
For part of your career, I believe, right? Not the whole thing. Or did you go for all 4?
Oh, yeah.
So you and I were there the same time for 4 years, but I was at the University of Rochester and you were at RIT. How did you determine to go to this school? Did you apply to other schools for this photography or graphic? Like where was your head at that point?
At that point, the only thing I thought I could do was photography. I didn't really consider other professions. I worked at a department store in the photo department for a while. And I remember there was somebody there who saw one of my pictures and said, if you do this, you'll be successful, because it was a particularly nice photograph. And he had said prior, if you do this, you won't be. And I said, okay, well, what do I need to do better? And he had some skills.
So you were open to mentorship, even as a young kiddo. You didn't have this fixed idea of what to do.
Right.
Okay.
And I had heard about RIT and researched it, and I applied there, and I believe University of Bridgeport. I toured RISD, but I wasn't really an artsy photographer.
Okay.
It didn't connect the vibe, and I was ready to move. I was ready to get out of Dodge. I loved my family. I still do. I had a wonderful childhood, but I was ready to.
Little exploration bug.
Yeah, okay. I was there.
All right.
And so I remember, I can picture it in my head when the mailbox was across this Diamond Hill Road, the busy street, and I got this big manila envelope from RIT that said congratulations on it, and I skipped across the street back to the house and ripped it open, and I just was so thrilled. I don't know when, time-wise, in terms of the year it was, but I don't know if they had even early decision back in 1986. It would have been.
They sure did.
But
Yeah, they
but
sure
I
did.
don't think that was me. But I believe I got into one or two other schools.
Okay.
But there was really no question that that's where I wanted to go.
Did you visit Rochester before you said yes, or were you just like, I'm going?
We did visit.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And the facility then, more recently, it's really been expanded in an incredible way.
Mm-hmm.
But it was definitely known as the best photography school in the world. It was, of course, Kodak at the time,
Mm-hmm.
still a giant in Rochester. And
back in 86, 87, absolutely. Yeah.
And it was a really interesting time to go there because later on, I was one of the first people to use the digital camera that was developed with Nikon and these
which was
Kodak.
which was sold. It was sold by a former inventor within the Kodak ecosystem because they figured it would compete with the patent. It would compete with if they created a digital version of film, it would actually not be good for their film business. As it turns out, when you sell that patent, it's also not good for your film business, right?
Yeah, there's still film out there, but digital changed everything.
What did you experience as a young person saying, hey, this is my idea of following mentorship and I'm going to go after this way of capturing imagery and still that, is aesthetically, fascinating to me and that allows for me to understand how things work from a chemistry standpoint in the development process. How did you experience the first year? Did it shift your expectations when you started going to classes? Did you get more engaged in a particular interest or like have an aptitude for something else or a different application of photography? Take us into your brain, into your mind and how you were thinking.
Well, of course, RIT's.
I know none of this has to do with being a chef right now, but we're going to get there. But there's a long arc to this, there are connective tissues that make up your plot line. Yeah. I'm sure we'll figure those out along the way.
Sure. Well, RIT was a full university, so I had English composition classes and European history and art history, and art 3D, 2D, and 3D art classes. And photography 101 was, there were students there that had not done a lot in their high school years and decided this is what they wanted to do. And there was myself who had some level of competency in darkroom work. But boy, did it really opens up your eyes to what's possible. And we had a professor there who had printed for Ansel Adams. We had amazing staff and team members there that you could. That
was my first major print to buy when I was younger and thought I was cool. It was an Ansel Adams, classic like mountain, like scape picture,
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, amazing.
And so we spent, hours and hours in dark rooms. I remember one print I made, it took me 10 hours or something in the dark room to put all these different elements together. And it taught me a lot about that when I walked in.
So wait,
sure.
10 hours in a dark room. What are you doing for 10 hours in a dark room to get an effect?
The particular picture was it was what somebody could probably do in Photoshop now in about 10 minutes, but it was combining different negatives to make one image. And so you had to print one and figure that out.
Did you have to layer at all?
Layering and more. So you'd print if the first picture was of a mountain, I think there was a hand involved and lightning shooting out of a finger or something. And,
okay.
And if that was the one. And once you set each individual image up, you then had to print it on a piece of paper and then put the paper away and undeveloped and then put a new negative in and then put the paper back in the same spot. And so that was a lot of trial and error. And it was,
I'm watching your hand motions and I'm listening to your calm explanation of a very complex process. And I can't help but to think of how you design and deliver dishes as a James Beard acknowledged chef today out of your restaurant.
It's totally connected. It's totally connected.
It's just unbelievable listening to you.
Yeah. The composition that I think I had inherently some skill with or some artistic gift with is applied to plates now.
Okay.
And if the balance of the plate, the balance of a photo, I don't do anything other than iPhone photography now, really.
Okay.
I did get back into large format photography right before I was cooking that seriously. I bought an ancient 4x5 and was out in the middle of winter photographing and developing them in my kitchen. Didn't convert a bathroom this time, but we
just an entire kitchen, right?
Entire kitchen,
Okay.
and was able to do everything in a dark bag. And
Okay, all right, that makes sense.
but that just didn't. It was fun and it was a good little hobby, but it didn't stick again. But I think there's an application from then till now.
So you're exploring, right? Discovering new territory and recipes, but in recipe development and how to work with teams. But back then it was just you, right? Mostly experimenting in a dark room, right? Blacked out, and then figuring out composition, balance for an aesthetic outcome, right? That's the sequence.
Correct.
So I'm not deposing you there, counselor, but I do appreciate the confirmation with such affirmative vibes. So you went through your 4 years in Rochester and sustained, I would imagine, as much snow as I did, because we were on the other side of the city from each other, as it were. And you had probably some thought of how to monetize this academic career, this collegiate experience. What were some of your thoughts about job? Because career, even though aspirational, we're just thinking about supporting ourselves usually as individuals coming out of college, right? Like, not going to live with mom and dad because you wanted to leave anyway and be independent and autonomous, right? Be somebody, whoever that somebody was or is now. Tell us some of your thoughts on what you thought you were going to do and what you did.
Well, a few years in, or probably 1 year into RIT, I got involved with the school magazine. Okay. And what I learned early on in my time at RIT was I wasn't particularly good in the studio. And they had these wonderful studios with lighting that most photographers don't have in their professional studios. And I was all thumbs in the studio, setting up still lifes, and they were just terrible. I just couldn't do it. And so journalism became the clear direction if I was going to stay a photographer, and was able to, it was Reporter Magazine is what it was called, and I became part of that staff pretty early on. And it was back to very similar things that I did in high school. I was photographing sports. We didn't have Division I, but we had a great hockey team.
Still do, I believe.
Still do.
Yeah.
Soccer and various other sports, basketball, and then different events around campus. We would get assignments and we would talk about, I believe it was a monthly magazine. Yeah, it must have been a monthly.
Okay. It's a lot of work. Yeah.
It was a lot of work, completely student run. We had advisors, but other than that, it was completely student run. And when I wasn't...
How many people were a part of that team?
Easy 20.
20? Okay.
Easy, at least. And
what was the core leadership of that group like? Were all 20 leaders, or was it stratified where like there was like an A-B group, like A were the folks who were kind of running the show and B were the ones who were just learning the ropes?
It was set up very similar to a newspaper. There was an executive editor and other editors. There was a photo editor. I became that in my last year. So it was very organized.
Yeah.
And there were production people. I may have been advertising folks, if I recall correctly.
Wow.
And we did a color issue every year, and that was kind of a big deal. And we had a darkroom right in the newspaper.
It's RIT. It's really well known for photography. And again, to your point, where George Eastman like really anchored Kodak, even though it became an international company in just under 10 years. I think it might have been 7 or 8 years. They had a presence in France and Europe. But this was the photograph world as we knew it back then without digital.
Yeah.
And you integrated reporting into it. You did it on campus, off campus. You probably had some supporters or underwriters, I would imagine, right? Some local community organizations that paid for ads.
Yes, and there was I did a few little jobs off for little small newspapers off campus, and then that became what I did. So in my senior year, I was applying to be intern at newspapers, summer interns, and other
around
things
the country.
Around the country.
Okay, so anything in Rochester? Was it the DNC back then, or was it the
DNC was
Democrat
there?
and Chronicle?
Yeah.
I think it was.
I think we did a ride along, but I never worked for them, and I was always a good photographer, but I was sort of in the middle of the pack in terms of skill level and things, and I accepted that. And
man, I'm telling you though, if you're listening to this, the conversation we're having, people are probably wondering, listen, how did this guy become a James Beard chef? I don't want to jump there yet, but just so everyone is listening, and so we're aware of this is not even seemingly close, even though we made a parallel just emerged to how you approached plating or how you approach plating a dish today and the composition of a photograph. Quite a bit has occurred since that time where you were looking to work for paper. Did you get a job at a paper eventually?
Only when I moved. Before I graduated. And we graduated, and I moved to Arizona for a small period of time.
Oh, okay.
And through summer in Arizona, beautiful, 110 degrees, and stayed there through about October. And I just got homesick, and things changed in my life.
So you did your first gig with a paper in Arizona.
Yes.
And then you came back home to the Northeast. And then what happened?
Moved back in with my folks, and then did some gigs for a local newspaper in Attleboro, the Sun Chronicle, which was always at Fian. Some of the same photographers then that I had remembered from being in high school. Mm-hmm. And then I got a job
Were you happy?
No, not particularly. I wasn't unhappy, but I was living at home again, which was always great. I love my family, but I was 20 whatever, and I had been living alone, or living on my own, and so I was looking, and then I got a job as an intern at a newspaper in Nashua, New Hampshire.
Okay,
and moved myself and my dog to a Best Western, and we lived in for $75 a week. That was what my pay.
I picture a Billy Bob Thornton sort of character with his dog in a hotel. All right, up in Nashua, because he's such a character when he plays in movies. Yeah. Anyway, back to you. Yeah. So the version of you that to me that's the image that was created. Thank you for that image in my dark room of my brain. Yeah. So you're up in Nashua with your dog, living in a
Best Western.
Best Western, good choice, and very economical. Yeah. And you decide that you're going to live in a hotel for 6 months, a year. What was the plan?
Yeah, I was there for the duration of the internship, which was until the beginning of summer. So I was there in the wintertime. Okay. And across from Green Ridge Turkey Farm, that's where the location was. A lot of people may know that. It's no longer there, of course. And then I got a job in the Lakes region as a photographer, and that was right around the summertime. I moved up there, and then it was there for a couple of years, and then back to Nashua to that paper and then I ran that's when my photography career came to, by my choice, an end. 5 years there.
Okay. So who gave you career advice along the way? You got a little snip of it saying, hey, do this and you'll get hired. It'll be good for your career. This was before RIT. Right, as a high school student, do this and it won't serve you well. So you avoided one, went to the other, and then went to a great school, popped around a bit to get settled into a career, put 5 years on the board, then said, I'm not doing this anymore. Who gave you advice during those 5 years? There was no Instagram. There was no Facebook. Guidance counseling stops at high school. Success centers and colleges normally don't reach out afterwards. Who's helping you think? Process?
Well, largely, if I was thinking of doing something, I would always talk to my parents about it still.
Okay.
probably ran it by my sister, maybe my grandparents at the time, they were still with us.
Nice. Now, when you say run it by, did you run it by saying, I'm going to do it anyway, but I'm going to run it by, just make sure I didn't get a blind spot? Or did you really seek like lots of feedback? Now, you can be honest here. We're in the vault where the treasures are, sort of unpacked, right? So
I kind of do my own thing. That's shocking.
Yeah, not so much. Yeah.
I kind of do my own thing
So it was a processing event, right? Like running it by family. Okay. I just didn't want to be presumptuous and say it was.
There were also, I think it's maybe important for the story to mention that when I was a photographer, toward the end of the millennium, there was an argument as to when that actually ended with one of our science writers. But in 1999, we did a series of stories about the end of the millennium. Okay. And I did a story on, I don't know exactly how the topic came up, but it was on religion and how it looked. We kind of wanted it to be a time capsule for the future. 100 years from then, people would look at these articles and see what life was like. And there were all different topics. And I got the religion assignment, and I said, could I write this story too? And I was writing a column about auto racing, believe it or not, probably not something you know. And it was called Left Turns, very creative.
Nice. Circle tracks, clearly.
Circle tracks. Yeah. And they said, they sort of talked to the reporters. We were a union shop, so they had to sort of get some buy-in. And people either didn't want the assignment or they said, sure, let's see what he can do. The story won an Associated Press award, the writing.
The writing.
The photography was just sort of
the writing won the award.
It was, I think,
from the Associated Press.
Yeah. So now I'm thinking, okay, maybe that's what I should be doing. And I've been told that I was a fairly good writer. And
why do you think you won the award? Why do you think it caught the AP's attention?
Yeah. I don't know. I do. I really guess. Well. I mean.
You have evidence. You have evidence. Well, you're a lawyer. There's some, what do you think when you think about that article and why it was something that hooked them? You said that it wasn't necessarily the photography, although I'm sure it contributed a bit. Yeah,
well, the award was specifically a writing one, reporting on religion, and it was very thorough. I mean, and it wasn't, no reporter is alone. It's I had editors, and they worked very well with me and guided me. And I don't know what the criteria was.
Was this your first story?
It was my first full story, yeah. And then I was able to write, I wrote a story wrote and photographed a story on the Merrimack River. That was my idea that they ended up publishing on super white paper and as an insert to the paper. And that was a lot of fun. I did the river from Manchester, New Hampshire to Lowell was sort of the bookends, the geographical bookends.
Did you realize you were innovating how that paper was doing work?
No, not.
Right, because innovation is all about making things better, right? Dishes in the restaurant, technology in our manufacturing firms. It
didn't really. It was, I wanted to do this thing, and I wanted to, I thought it would be fun. I mean, and it was. That's a canoe down the river with this wonderful guy talking about the ecosystem and the environment. I learned how to scuba dive in 3 weeks so I could do underwater photography. Nice. And put together this package that was both photographs and words. And I really enjoyed that, creating something. And I think that may bring us a little bit to the food world, but this creating of something and also realizing, okay, I'm pretty good at this. And then I left the newspaper to be a sort of a correspondent. There was some sort of, these are these sort of middle years or something where I worked as a correspondent covering a couple towns, primarily for the reporting piece of it. Ended up doing some renewable energy work for a website. And then my daughter was born, and then all of a sudden I was a stay-at-home dad.
Wow. And then you said, I'm going to be a lawyer.
Sort of. I'm stay-at-home dad, and I'm thinking, okay, now what? Because it's nothing I had ever planned for. It was an amazingly wonderful time. I had my son was a couple years old. My daughter had just been born, and I was with.
So this is Julia and Jake.
Julia and Jake.
Okay.
And a friend of mine who I had been a reporter with at the Lakes Region newspaper, who had left to go to law school. He moved down south.
So this is just after Nashua, right? Just after internship, you go to the lakes.
Go to the lakes.
Okay, yeah, got it.
And he became a good friend of mine. And he went to law school and became a lawyer in wills and trusts and estates.
Okay, estate lawyer.
Estates.
Okay,
and we were at my folks' Cape House, and we're knee deep in the water, and I'm stay-at-home dad, and I'm going, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life now. Here I am. I was probably 30. Okay. No, I was older than 30. And he said, go to law school. I said, I can't go to law school. I got to take care of my kids. And he said the 3 words that would change my life: go at night.
Go at night.
And I said,
Shazam.
Shazam indeed.
Okay.
And the blender gets turned on. I mean, I immediately started looking into the LSATs. I started looking at schools and
explore.
And then ran it by my wife at the time.
Yeah.
And
she was in?
She was in.
Nice tone.
I don't know.
Nice tone, chef. I like that. She was, kind of.
I think I probably pushed it to a degree, and got into Roger Williams University School of Law and Suffolk. And at one point I thought of commuting. I lived in the southern tier, western New Hampshire. So in theory, I could have gotten to Suffolk a few nights a week, but we decided to move home, my home. Okay. So I could have the support of my family. And then I would go to school at night. My mom would come over to take care of the kids. My then wife worked day job.
Yeah. Okay.
And I would go to school, and for 4 years went to school at night. Became a lawyer. 38.
And then said, okay, now I'm going to go be a zealous advocate, right? Which is what a lawyer is for people.
Correct.
I think that's the formal definition. It's probably one of the first sentences of how they indoctrinate you into law school, right? The whole zealous advocacy sort of rip that inevitably comes out of a professor or dean's mouth as you realize the burden of this, like, training, really, right? Being a lawyer is a training as much as it is an education.
It is a trade school.
Okay.
It is a trade school. Oh. And I don't say that with any negativity at all. It is a trade.
It's the first time anyone has said it's a trade school.
I believe it is. Yeah.
Okay. So tell us a little bit more about this definition of a trade school.
Well, I think law school teaches you how to think a certain way. And it is, you're learning a trade, and you don't really, but in a general way, you don't really hone in what you're going to do in law school. It's a general education, right? You cover constitutional law, property law, environmental law, if you choose to take that, and
forget about torts.
Torts, of course, which is, and you learn through this process of give and take with the professors and the other students. You learn
the give and take, the back and forth. Important to you in the training?
It is. It's because in law, that's what when you're practicing, you're constantly doing that. Whether you're hearing something and responding to a person in a robe or to a person who's across the desk from you. And we had a very large night class when we started, and it honed in. There were some moves and some divorces and some other reasons people dropped out. And so it was a 4-year process because we went, we couldn't take a full course load like normal law school is 3 years. And I had some internships along the way. And, it's a good education for anybody, whether you want to be a lawyer or not.
I like the way that you shared how you thought it's a way to think, right? And it's general, then it gets applied, right? And then you can see that in lots of trades, right? That you're teaching you problem-solving skills, right? Whether you're in the, helping a homeowner or a commercial person with HVAC or plumbing, or if you're diving into the world of lawyering and you're an advocate for someone, this is training for you to execute the advocacy. So what were you going to do now that you were a stay-at-home dad who was stimulated by some reading and writing in blue books? Right? It's probably back then, right? Did you write your exams in blue books back in the day?
Yes, it converted to computers at some point in law school.
All right, now I'm dating myself.
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, the blue books were still there.
Blue books are still alive. Okay. So let's think about your mindset and the way you were thinking about work, because you have a young family. 3-4 years goes by. Julia is now 5, 6 at that point, probably.
3, 4.
3, 4.
Yeah.
Okay. So wait. Oh, right. Because you jumped right into school. Oh, I see.
We were in Rhode Island when she was 18. We celebrated her second birthday in Rhode Island.
Okay.
First winter.
Thanks for that timeline refresh. Okay. Got it. Now I'm following fully. So what are you going to do? Like, did you just say, hey, I'm going to go work for a firm? I'm going to go do wills and trusts and estate planning like my friend who encouraged me to go at night.
Many lawyers will tell you that the first client that walked in the door, that's the type of law that they did. Mine was just the first job that I got. I got a job for a guy who did a bunch of different things. He was a solo practitioner.
Okay.
Eventually, I think was invited to leave the bar, but I worked for him for a few months. But then I got a job. I needed a job. I had a great, at the time, he was at Roger Williams. He was a really good career development profession.
So they supported you in the sort of like what you're going to do next.
Right.
Okay.
And he found a job at a law firm in litigation support in Providence. That was a firm at the time that only had partners, and that was sort of their selling point. Okay. And I interviewed, and I think they liked that I wasn't 22 or 23 or the typical law school age. Mm-hmm. And because I was going at night, I could work there during the day. And I started there in their litigation support for about 20, 25 hours a week.
Wow. And that was your foray into lawyering.
Yeah, and so I saw what they did. They did civil litigation. Okay. It was a business law firm for the most part. Okay. And then the civil litigators would support the businesses that maybe were started by and helped to grow by the lawyers in the business side of things. And then they either have to bring a lawsuit or defend a lawsuit. And then that's what we did. Okay. And
sounds like a nice setup, right? To understand how to support corporations, LLCs, and entities.
Yeah, it was. Okay. And it was a great group of people, great lawyers, very supportive of me as a person. And I was there for about 18 months. And then I got a job at another business firm as same role, basically. Mm-hmm. And they hired me. Assuming I was going to pass the bar, they hired me then in January of my senior or fourth year of law school. And I worked there until I took time off to take the Rhode Island and Mass bar exams. But I started there, and then I had a job there once I was sworn in.
And you were there for a while?
Not that long. Okay. I was there until that January. Okay. And we're in the vault, so I'll say it. I got fired, and and they were right. Okay. I was not in it. I had gone through a divorce. Okay. And my focus was not there. Okay. I was derailed big time, as anybody will tell you who's been through that.
Divorces, people who've gone through divorces will say it's very rarely storybook. It's a traumatic interruption in work and life and reorienting yourself to children and the person who brought them into the world with you. So,
right. So it was and
were they gentle about it, or they were like, "Hey, pal, we don't care about your personal life. You're out."
No, they were gentle about. They were wonderful about it, actually. Okay. And they said, you can use your office to find a job, and we're not, well, let's pick a date. And they sort of gave me.
That's unusual.
Where they paid me.
I mean,
I think it was like 6 weeks where they continued to pay me. And so it was very
sensitive.
It was. And I,
could be
I'm
the
very
best
grateful.
lawyering let go that story that we've captured to date. Yeah, this is good. Okay.
Yeah, there was looking back, it doesn't surprise me as to who those people were and still are, and they're doing well. And so that moved me into a solo practice, and eventually to a couple of different law firms. And
what people may not know about being a lawyer is that you can always jump into working with other practices as almost like a freelance professor, right? Or like, you're of counsel or you're an associate, but you're just part of that team. It happens in sports a lot, but in our career pathways, sometimes it's looked at as being jumpy from one to the other, when it's really frequently, at least from the interviews I've held over the years here in the vault and elsewhere in formal research, it has to do with feeling like the place is a dwelling place for my work, is what people tend to say, right? Like the power of the people, their values, the vibe, how they handle conflict, how they celebrate successes, how they deal with adaptability or the need to explore or self-correct or self-scout, right? Each other or themselves, right? Or when I say self-scout with others, like if the two of us were working on a team, like, do we do an after-action report? How do we handle it when something goes wrong? All of that contributes to the environment. Like, you can have whatever skill you want as a creative, exploratory soul, whether you're a photographer or a lawyer who likes a particular balanced plate as a chef even, but the place is the arena for the work, right? So I say that mostly to say, it sounds like you were trying to find the place that felt like the arena for your work.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, the work.
I mean, I could be completely off. I'm trying to apply some research and some perspective of, it's okay to do that.
Well, the thing about it was, I was never passionate about being a lawyer.
Oh,
I cared about my clients.
Okay.
But the first area of law that I practiced in was divorce. That was not particularly fun.
Okay.
You're walking people through their terrible part of their lives, a terrible part.
It's not a wiffle ball game in Cumberland, Rhode Island in the neighborhood.
It is not.
It is not working for the yearbook to capture those moments.
And my head was, I'm very solution oriented. So I said, well, okay, so you have this problem. You have 2 kids and a 401k and this and that. And the system, I practiced this primarily in Rhode Island, but also in Massachusetts, is poorly designed.
Okay.
Unless you're a lawyer who wants to get a big retainer and the system and just drain it. Drain the retainer.
Okay.
And then when that's gone, if the client isn't maybe able to pay another one,
then you work.
It's time to get to the solution that Pete had 6 months ago.
Oh.
And it was incredibly frustrating.
Terrible.
Because that just wasn't who I am. It just wasn't who I am. So when I started getting into more of the civil litigation, and I ended up at a firm that was a law firm that did primarily car accidents and was on TV and still is, and billboards and things. It didn't require that. Okay. This sort of, I just didn't have what it takes to be that type of lawyer in the family court arena. I didn't have that. Ethics,
empathy, right? Kind of get in the way of doing that. Yeah.
And I just, it just was, I just couldn't separate it. I couldn't separate it. I just saw I just felt sort of terrible all the time. And so.
Do you think a lot of people just say it's part of the job? This is what you got to do.
Yeah. And they're right. But I just wasn't willing to say, okay.
So you had a lot of courage to walk away from something that you poured 4 years of study into and went from divorce to civil. And even though you kind of removed some of the argina associated with trying to focus on an upfront retainer, draining it, things that didn't suit you at all based on your persona, you eventually stayed in that space though, right? Where you were helping folks with accident settlements, which removed the part that was the major gulp, right? Like, ugh, right?
Yep.
You did that more recently for how many years? If you include, like, at the current firm where you just left, right? Fully.
Oh, 15. So I was a lawyer for 15 years.
So 15. And for the last couple of years, you're going to your third year, right? At Foglia.
Yes.
As a chef owner who in 18 months received a James Beard Semifinalist nomination. You've been requested to cook at the foundation in New York City. You've already done that. You did that about 6 months ago?
In July, yeah.
In July, a little over 6 months ago. Time flies. Try to keep track of you, chef. And when you look back over your life, finding that place where your individual composition is in alignment with the behaviors and the thinking that's a part of that work. How do you resolve the story path of back in time to now going forward? Big question. And I'll get you started, I think, by kind of helping both of us recap this really phenomenal but thoughtfully reflective journey that takes into consideration the fact that you kind of always knew that something wasn't right in certain things, right? That you were doing or thinking about doing. So, for instance, I'm not a wiffle ball champion. I can throw a good pitch. It's the underhand, tricky pitch. But that's actually very analytical of you to throw a pitch like that, right? Analytics, discernment, picking your effort and doing it really well. That to me comes out of the wiffle ball days and the street hockey days in Cumberland. Then you move to photography in 8th grade and understanding how things work, right? That organizational competency. Some people just love it. My wife Shannon loves thinking about the puzzle pieces of anything, instructional design, whatever it might be, and understanding the biochemical reaction underneath, right? That's really the underpinning of doing well in a dark room helped you almost be flawless in your first attempts, right? Exploring what that is, understanding it, and then making efforts informed by that. So then you go off to school and you raise your hand, and despite being uncomfortable, the urge to capture images, right, which is an aesthetic type of activity, right? So you have to be aware of, you have to be receptive of, open to, understanding context, and then knowing when to capture, discernment, to create eventually something that looks good. You're doing that over and over again, but then you realize, you get a little advice, do this versus that. You end up under RIT, more magazine work, a little bit more intense than the yearbook or the high school magazine or publication, right? Paper. You realize over time that you're also good at language, which language is creating language sets to express something that you've explored, like the river, the Merrimack.
Yes, Merrimack.
And then innovating how publishing happened. Like it's something that you did. And you were even acknowledged by the Associated Press in your first full story. You won an award and an acknowledgement. So it sounds like when you're all in creating an experience for others, like conjuring it up and understanding the aesthetics that are involved, that you're all in.
Right.
But in none of those endeavors were you totally in charge of your destiny. But now you are as a chef.
Right.
I don't know. React to what I just said. Be great. Take the mic from me, will you? I've been going strong here. I love listening to you, man.
Well, that's a lot, but it's very accurate, because one of the things that I react to in my life as I look back on it and thinking about our discussion today is if there's something that I want to do and I'm given positive feedback about a piece of it. So if I wanted to go to RIT, I wanted to be a photographer, I was given positive feedback by somebody I worked with and my family about my photography and that I'll be successful. And then I got in and I went there and I was okay. I did, middle of the pack in terms of grades with all of the different things. I realized what I wasn't good at, realized what I was pretty good at, ended up in newspapers, etc. And then all of a sudden here I am and I'm a stay-at-home dad and I'm not doing anything. And I was taking care of my kids. I was doing a lot, but never planned for that. There's nothing wrong with it. Loved it. Wonderful time. Did get some awards as a journalist, never as an attorney, some awards as a chef. But when I was studying in law school, I had a little desk in our basement and I had a sign on the wall that said, "It's never too late to be what you might have become." But I didn't know it meant chef.
Say that one more time for us. What it said above your desk in the basement.
It's never too late to be what you might have become. And I think everybody should have that written somewhere, because I thought that becoming an attorney at 36 or 8 or whatever it was late. Certainly some of the big law firms that I applied to didn't even want to give me the time of day, because I think they thought, well, he's already established. He's not going to sleep in a cot in a room and work 22 hours a day, bill 2,500 hours a year. So, but I didn't know that was being a chef. And so while I was in law school, as my first attorney jobs, and then longer into my career, that's when I started cooking seriously and started to think about what I might have become.
And you tested that, right? You did pop-ups for people, like special events. In fact, I first learned about you, even though we had met along the way briefly prior to, but I first learned about your cooking when I was visiting my dad at Mass General, and I ran into someone who went to high school with you. And I was sitting there, and she turned and she looked at me and she said, "My name?" And I said, "Her name?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "What are you doing here?" And we started, she said, "You look like you're in great shape for your old age." And I said, "Well, I'm doing all right. Things are quite good. I'm eating well, and I've been vegan for, over a decade or so, maybe 13, 14, I don't know, however many years at that point.
Sure.
Definitely over a decade." And she said, "Oh, I know somebody who is a vegan chef, and you're not really known as necessarily promoting being a vegan chef. You're a chef, and the award, which I think I should remind you and me of this and others of this, the award you received from James Beard wasn't in the vegan category. It was in the Northeast chef category.
Correct. There's no vegan. I was the only vegan chef.
You were the only vegan chef in all of that corridor of the United States. And probably, I didn't go back and check this, and it might be kind of fun to do this, how many of those chefs that year in all the regions for all the James Beard acknowledgments were vegan chefs. And I would probably tell you, if I were to guess, and I'm not a betting person, it would be less than 5.
Likely, yeah.
So that really puts you in a different place. But this person then introduced me to you, and we tried to get you for one of those pop-ups, but it was very difficult to do. It was around COVID, right? It was for Shannon's 50th birthday, and then we stayed in touch. And the beauty of the Story Vault is that I can invite people who are exploring how to be part of this ecosystem, and also who can influence others by this sort of modern career guidance that you can get by listening to these episodes, how to reconsider their own career paths and story paths as they seek really to become more engaged in work, because it's so much a part of life, right? We have our personal identity and our work identity, and when they can be interwoven in a meaningful way, right?
Yeah.
You can live a story that has meaning and worth and illustrates your true value. And it's a discernment process. So to your point on the words that were above your desk, it isn't too late to be what you could have become.
Right.
And you have become that, and you're still becoming, in the words of Warren Bennis, which I think he wrote the book on becoming a leader. In fact, that was the title. When you think of the future now, as you've had the success and you're being a collaborative player, and you've taken out parts of the ingredients of work that don't belong in the style of work that you wish to be a part of, because you're more in good control of your environment, what can we see from you? What are you thinking?
Well,
because I don't think you're stopping.
No. And
not to put any pressure on you, of course.
No, but it's okay, because
it could be internally. I'm not asking you for a growth plan for your business, but it could be just internally how you're shifting the way in which you do the work with your team, or the way you think about the work's relationship to the world. Or it could be a part of maybe some teaser considerations for the audience and me on potential growth or expansion, or different efforts that you might be thinking of making.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm still we're talking about weeks here since I completely stopped practicing law. So, I mean, I was of counsel for...
But you still ran the business fully as a chef owner while you were being of counsel.
Right.
And it's been 6 weeks?
Not even.
Okay. 5, 4?
3?
3 weeks ago.
3.
Okay.
Yeah. It was, yeah. So when I started the restaurant, we were only open 3 days a week, and I was still going into the office full-time Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. We weren't open Sunday or Monday.
Okay.
Or Tuesday or Wednesday. And then it grew, and then we opened Sundays, so I was working 7 days a week at some function. And, a chef day is not 8 hours with a lunch period. It's 12 to 14. Mm-hmm. And then became of counsel in June of 24. And that meant I was going into the office less. And we were open 5 days a week now, Monday and Sunday included. And so, but what was happening was that you mentioned much earlier in the conversation, zealous advocacy. And that is part of what is a lawyer's job, is to be a zealous advocate. What I realized was that I just couldn't be anymore. And so it wasn't a service to the clients, even though I knew them, and I had known some of them for many years, for 4 or 5 years, whose cases just sort of lingered for whatever reason, and they might have been in litigation. I just realized that it wasn't fair to them. My law firm sort of tolerated it and things, but there was more and more angry calls of where is Attorney Carvelli, and why isn't he picking up his phone? So I made the decision, it also was not a service to the restaurant and to my investors and to my guests and to my staff. So once I'm settling into this new sort of role and this new world where when I think to myself, oh, what's happening with the Smith case? I go, oh, it's not my task anymore to deal with the Smith case. So I can then say what's happening with the Valentine's Day menu.
Yeah.
And what's happening with our Wednesday night special events.
Oh, gosh. And Monday music.
And
right?
Monday music.
Yeah.
And what's happening with that smoothie bar in the town next to us that's for sale that has my eye. Or what can we do to increase...
Grow mushrooms in the Berkshires.
Grow mushrooms in the Berkshires.
I'm just saying, would love for you to make some lion's mane.
This is not my...
around the corner,
Yeah, this is not my first trip to the Berkshires. Won't be my last. And I love it here, and I love where we are. And I feel like we're really just at the beginning. And even though we're 2.5 years in at the restaurant, we've been positively received. And I've
such an understatement, by the way, but yes.
Well, thank you. But there's always something that can be done better. We have and so the future is what is, I'm trying to be very, very present. We have an amazing team from, you walk in the door 2 nights a week and my mother greets you and seats you and gives you your menu and asks what kind of water you have. How lucky am I to have that? My mother, Janet. And we have my sister at the bar frequently, or not at a table, that you can eat at the bar. She's a wonderful supporter. And then my dad comes in on the nights my mother works and we'll have a plate of pasta or whatever. And my daughter, Julia, works at the restaurant. My son supports me through digital media. And of course, my wife, Linda, is there as well.
Your son from California, California supports you.
Right.
Yeah, amazing.
In California.
And you've really integrated everyone's talents, right? You know how things work. It's like the biochemistry of running a restaurant, right? It's like the biochemical reaction,
right?
Of how to put people together in combinations.
Right.
So you see skills and you understand them and invite them to show up. I have a question for you, Chef. These are three questions that I ask everyone, and you don't have to answer them, as I always caution people, all at once. This isn't a quiz. There's no grade, but it's helpful, I think, to bring us to that meaningful close, even though we'll probably go on and on after we come out of the vault. I always like to understand the answer to this question. Doesn't need to be a long answer. Just needs to help us understand what you think you were raised for. So, Chef, what were you raised for? What do you want to be known for? And what are you doing about it now? So, what were you raised for, Chef?
I think ultimately I was raised to care for people and take care of people. And now I'm doing that through food.
And what do you want to be known for?
Taking care of people and being a good person and being kind. Kindness is really is a focus of mine. I'm not a plate thrower or a screamer, and there've been kitchens are hot and stressful, and there are moments, but ultimately that bad energy comes through the food. And so I'd like to be known for being kind and understanding and helping people get to where they want to be.
Third question. What are you doing about being known for that kindness and that calm evenness now, in particular, as a personal effort, so that can be your legacy?
Just waking up every day with that goal in mind.
Focus.
Just focusing on it and realizing that we are, as a chef, this is a quote from Marcus Samuelsson, a wonderful chef. We're in the memory business. And I call my restaurant Foglia, which means leaf in Italian, but our sort of slogan is experience Foglia. and we want people to have a good experience. They come into the restaurant, they can shed whatever it is they're carrying from the day. They can eat a good meal, have a nice cocktail, a nice glass of wine, mocktail, enjoy the company of their friends and family, be part of our family, and leave happy.
It's super clear. From wiffle ball, underhand thrower, to yearbook photographer, to composition-focused RIT student, to AP acknowledged journalist for his writing, to ethical, zealous advocate. You have become a zealous advocate of experience creation through food that serves as the good kind of intake to our bodies so that we have the energy to do the things we love, just as you are experiencing doing the thing that you're meant to do, that you love. Man, I'm thrilled to have you here today. And could you leave us with that quote one more time that was above your desk when you were studying in law school?
It's never too late to be what you may have become.
My man.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Chef. Every story matters. I'm convinced. And what matters to you matters to us and to the guests you just heard from. So please drop your insights, realizations, and takeaways in the comment section below. Give us a like, and also maybe even share with a friend or colleague or family member who could benefit from listening to this story. That's it for now. Dr. Dennis Ribello signing off from my Story Vault.